We're taking a look tonight at the downtown LA Justice Center. It has been an interesting time in those streets of Los Angeles, especially in front of that building. We've been talking a bit about 2025 and the eventful year that was here in Los Angeles and around the country. And of course, it's been a lot in terms of litigation as well on a city level. Joining us now to talk about all that and more is Hydee Feldstein Soto, a city attorney for the city of Los Angeles, someone who've had the great pleasure of talking about all these issues with over the course of the year. Thanks for coming back to look back at the year.
Thank you so much. It's my 6th time here.
Oh, there we go. We're getting somewhere finally. And that really says something because a lot of that was this year. It was a very eventful year, to say the least for you and all of us.
Not to quote Queen Elizabeth, I would call it annus horribilis.
Right.
So it's been a challenging year. Started really January 7th for me, with, of course, no one was predicting the wildfires.
Yeah.
And that occupied the first 2 months of the year, almost to the exclusion of everything else. We then, of course, went into our budget balancing job, which I mean, that's really the mayor and city council.
Yeah.
But it's always a stressful time because each department has to justify their own budget.
Yeah.
And then we got a little bit of a breather for 2 weeks until we suddenly had the ice raids in downtown LA. 4,000 National Guard troops called up to the streets of Los Angeles. Think about that. Our entire police force is barely double that. And if you add the 800 Marines, 8,600 is about what we have on our streets. And that's about what came in from federalized troops. And
yeah, it was a lot. I mean, LAPD is at decades low staffing levels, which is one of the reasons that you can make that number, and that ties into the budget and civil liability payouts, which I also want to discuss with you. But let's begin with the fires. Your office worked a lot on price gouging, on working on some of those who were taking advantage of that moment with rent gouging as well. Just tell the people at home about some of those.
I'm actually, we collaborated with the U.S. Attorney, the Attorney General, and the District Attorney. I'm obviously, my office is primarily responsible for property and neighborhoods and misdemeanors. And so a lot of the felony looting and a lot of those cases really went to the district attorney. A lot of the allegations of charity fraud went to the AG, but my office received 1,120 referrals of potential price gouging. We sent out over 1,100 cease and desist letters, and we sent those out to landlords, owners, brokers and renters so that people would understand their rights. There were some folks who were intractable. We issued over 28 subpoenas, and I think we filed 2 or 3 very large class actions, one of which was against the Nightfall Group, the other one of which was against Airbnb.
That was part of the $62 million one, I think, right?
Yeah, Airbnb was 62 million.
Well, I mean, there was a lot there, and I think a lot of folks who were having a hard time securing housing in the wake of the fires, thank you in your office for that time. And you mentioned the ICE raids, the immigration enforcements. There were lawsuits also that LA City Attorney's Office, your office, joined, were a part of ACLU lawsuits, including Vasquez-Perdomo v. Nome. I mean, this was about the tactics for the stops that we saw here in the immigration raids, the Fourth Amendment stuff, the stops without pretext or based on race and vocation and location. Of course, the Supreme Court voted to stay that order and allowed those tactics to stay in place on a 6-3 vote. What was your take on the way that all that litigation worked out and the way the Supreme Court ruled as well?
I think it worked out fairly well so far. The fact is that we are down, and we have been down for a while. The Marines left, and we were down to 1,250 National Guard troops. The action brought by our Attorney General, Rob Bonta, in Northern California, which was an action that we helped. We filed declarations and amicus briefs.
That's San Francisco versus Trump, the one on sanctuary cities, right?
No, it's Newsom versus Trump. This is the one on how only Governor Newsom has the power to call up the National Guard.
Oh, the National Guard one, yes. Gotcha.
And Judge Breyer issued an order that, in fact, all of the National Guard had to leave our streets. That order cited the declaration that we submitted here from here in my office in Los Angeles 7 times. In joining Perdomo, we've organized a coalition of 22 cities plus the county. And the cities include a couple of cities in Orange County and a couple of cities in Santa Barbara and Ventura County. So we are presenting a united front. I'm very proud of the fact that my office led that coalition, and that our friends at Munger, Tolles and Olson are representing the coalition on a pro bono publico basis.
Well, it was a relatively united front on that issue, as you mentioned, but also stemming from some of these immigration enforcements, the King's Day protest this time in June. We saw lots of street protests that was protesting the federal presence and occupation of some of the streets in some of the areas. And as a result, LAPD found itself on the end of some use of force cases. There was a lawsuit from journalists who say that some of these less lethal munitions should not be used on journalists. And there was a preliminary injunction, excuse me, that said the LAPD has to stop using, essentially, these less lethal munitions. And you were prepared to have that, to request that the judge revoke that. LA City Council voted 12-0 to say, please don't do that, city attorney. Talk about that moment with City Council, and also...
Well, actually, thank you for the opportunity to explain it, because my position is very simple. I'm the lawyer for the City of Los Angeles, so it is my legal obligation to defend the city against claims. It's as simple as that. With respect to this particular injunction, when I came into office, I inherited a dozen or more injunctions that ran for multiple years. Those injunctions are not always consistent with each other, and they limit what the city can do with its budget. So personally, I'm fundamentally opposed to injunctions. Either the injunction mirrors existing law and is consistent, in which case if you have a foot fault, even if nobody is hurt, the plaintiff's bar, the plaintiff's lawyer will come back and ask for fees and sanctions. And if you do hurt somebody, the individual always has a claim against you for violations of law. So if it mirrors the law, it's just another vehicle to get fees and sanctions out of the city. If it's disparate than the state law or the city's laws, then I wind up with 2 and 3 different injunctions from different courts that are not consistent with one another, and that creates an impossible situation for law enforcement. The last point I want to make is that the particular injunction that was issued by the district court judge in connection with the press club case had an overly broad definition of journalist that didn't necessarily incorporate credentials. It allowed journalists at the back of a skirmish line without any constraints on how many people could go back there or how we could check their backgrounds. And it restricted the police department from the use of any less lethal weapons. You need to remember, and that included, in this case, batons, and it included the kinds of tools that the police use. If you have 400 officers out there and 2,500 protesters, there has to be a way for the police to enforce the law and disperse a local, an unlawful assembly without resorting to either their fists or guns.
Yeah.
And my problem with this injunction is that's all it left us with.
And Chief McDonald was making the same point here on the show. Members of City Council were concerned about some of the use of force in some of these votes that they've taken, but ultimately we've seen record civil liability payouts this year, fiscal year 2025, something approximating $300 million. And that also comes in part to your office. And I think for the folks at home to just understand, perhaps you can explain, how is it you make that calculation, and why do we see these ballooning civil liability payouts? Because, of course, Chief McDonald has talked about it in terms of the LAPD standpoint. You're a part of that conversation and setting those numbers. How do you see it?
Let me start with, I don't create the liability. I'm the lawyer. I defend the city. But the liability, obviously there's some lawsuits against my office, but that's a rounding error. The liability really stems from a lot of what the city has been trying to turn around. So whether it's potholes, whether it's infrastructure that creates a dangerous condition, whether it's vehicle collisions.
And LAPD use of force.
And LAPD use of force. There's all kinds of reasons why the city gets sued. At the end of the day, we evaluate each case on its merit. We are always happy to talk settlement on any case. And how do I evaluate it? It's a question, number one, of what's the legal theory and how likely is it that I'm liable. Most lawsuits have comparative negligence, so I'm rarely going to be 100% liable in a negligence case if I take it to court. So it's a question of establishing how liable am I, and then what is the case worth? What are the damages? What's the harm? And if the plaintiffs are reasonable, I would always prefer to settle than go to court. If you look at what happened in July, we got hit with a $48 million verdict on a sanitation truck hitting a pedestrian. Now, I stipulated to liability there. I wasn't going to fight liability. We were clearly liable. but $48 million is just off the charts.
Yeah, so this is a conversation, of course, in the judicial system of whether we should have liability caps for certain kinds of lawsuits, and also a conversation on what's the sources of some of these lawsuits and that are events that are happening in Los Angeles, and you've sketched that out well. Another thing that comes with these costs is occasionally the enlisting of external law firms to work on some of these issues. Recently, City Council has voted 12 or by about 11-3 or so to allow you to enlist an external law firm for some of these LAPD use of force lawsuits. But also, you and I have had a conversation about law firm Gibson Dunn and LA City Council approving your usage of that law firm for some of what we've seen in Federal Judge David O'Carter's courtroom with homelessness. And you want to talk about that, I know, because there was an interesting ruling from the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. But talk about using these law firms for these big issues.
We use outside counsel selectively. I mean, if you mentioned earlier the Los Angeles Press Club case, after the emergency stay, which was really something that in terms of resources and surge we needed outside counsel for, these are mostly cases that we handle in-house everywhere we can. So the LA Press Club appeal was handled by our appellate division internally. Hiring outside counsel is always going to be necessary in 3 instances. One is in instances where my office doesn't have the expertise or the capacity to build it. That includes things like criminal defense. We just don't do that. We are prosecutors. Secondly, it's in instances where there's a sudden surge of work that overwhelms the lawyers who are assigned to do civil litigation or assigned to do police litigation.
Right.
And so we always have a need to have an excess capacity to manage the workload. And then candidly, the third one is where we're not getting respected in the court and we are not achieving the results that we need. That was the situation with the hiring of Gibson Dunn. I'm going to say again, they have done a fabulous job, and what they have billed us is a fraction of what this court monitor that Judge Carter wanted to appoint would have billed us over the course of a year with an 8-person team.
Well, it was a huge conversation with Judge Carter and homelessness, and I know you kicked in $1 million of your department's money to help with this Gibson Dunn fees. And there's so much more to talk about. We got through a lot today, and I hope we're going to get through a lot next year. Maybe not an annus horribilis, maybe something better. I don't have the Latin on it, but let's say bonus.
I have, views that 2026 is going to be a huge improvement on 2025.
Well, it wouldn't be difficult for that to be true. It's a relatively low bar. Let's go for it. Great to have you on. Great to see you in your 6th time. Looking forward to your 7th.
Thank you so much.
Happy holidays. Thank you
soon.
so much. Thank you so much. Hydee Feldstein Soto, LA City attorney, talking about some of the big issues and what she and the Queen of England once said was an annus horribilis. And we'll come back. Stay with us.